Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm Visible Lady of Faith, and this is
Her sidekick, her husband.
And today we're
Yay.
gonna talk about the Sunday school lesson. So, what's the title of the lesson?
Christian's expectation of grace.
And this lesson is taken from Jonah, the 3rd chapter, verses 1 through 5. Chapter 4, verses 6 through 11.
That's right.
For May the 3rd, 2026. Today we're going to talk about Jonah.
Yeah, the prophet.
The prophet, right. And Jonah was a Jewish person.
Yeah.
And he received a word from the Lord. The second time, as the lesson starts out, the second time. But he had received a word from the Lord first time, and the Lord wanted him to go to Nineveh.
And I want to point out in Nineveh, we're trying to head off racism and stuff like that. You shouldn't be biased about things, and that's not what God's trying to teach us. But the Ninevites were non-Jewish people, where in the Bible they call them Gentiles.
Okay, so maybe Jonah felt that they didn't deserve to receive a message from the Lord, so he decided to go to Tarshish instead, which wasn't a very good decision because on the way he got into a boat to go to Tarshish via Joppa, and while they were going, they ran into some bad weather on the sea, bad winds, and it was so dangerous winds and everything that was so bad that it jeopardized the people's safety.
And see, the interesting thing about people on the boat, people, they know when they're dealing with the elements of the sea, and you really don't have that much control. You see in your boat go up, and one thing that we've experienced when we went on our honeymoon. You remember that storm that we were in, and sometimes I remember walking on the boat, and I can see way up there because that boat was, the boat, the cruise that we were on, we can see that bouncing that boat all around.
Yeah.
So people kind of, get superstitious and what have you. And the men got scared, on the boat. So they were lightening the boat off, throwing things off. And finally, Jonah came about and said, it's me, toss me off. And that's how he got tossed off the boat because he was in trouble with being a prophet. He was in trouble with God because God was telling him to go one place and he'd make a decision to go elsewhere.
Right. So what was the message that Jonah was supposed to deliver to the people, the Ninevites? He wanted to encourage them to turn from their evil ways. And some of these things that they needed to turn from, behaviors that they were like violence, and they were inflicted pain on their people.
And see, there's another thing I would point out. Please read Isaiah, the 19th chapter, and go to the latter part, and you see that I've heard people say, well, the Bible it's a Jewish thing. No, they just talk about the Israelites. And the reason why they talked about the Israelites, because people say that the Israelites is God's chosen people. No, that's his heritage. That's what, if you go and follow in Matthew, the first chapter, you see going through there, you'll see all matter of fact, if you go into Luke, and I think it's the 3rd or 4th chapter, I can't remember right now. But anyway, you can follow from God all the way to Jesus Christ on the cross, the lineage, and that's in Luke. But in Matthew, it starts more like at David or Abraham. I have to look at that again. But anyway, the important part is look at those two places, look that up, and that's God's inheritance or for our salvation. But he also points out Assyrians, which is the Assyrians, the Ninevites is part of that group of people, and also the Egyptians. So the Egyptians is God's chosen people. The Israelites are his inheritance, and the Assyrians is God's hand. In other words, he used them to, I put it this way, they used them to
punish,
yeah,
or discipline people,
discipline other nations, because the Assyrians, they fought with the Israelites. So keep this in mind. The loving the Creator, he created all human beings on the planet, everybody, and we should pay attention to this. Why would he have favoritism over one group of people as opposed to the other? What race we all belong to is the human race.
That's right. So I'm going to back up a little bit about the Ninevites that Jonah was encouraged to go to, because the Ninevites were uh, inflicting violence on people and causing them pain and suffering. Nineveh was a big city with lots of people.
Well, see, that's the whole thing. As I was
Yeah.
studying and looking at that, they're
Mm-hmm.
not sure if it's area, the size of the city.
Mm-hmm.
Was it large, or was it a lot of people, or was it that as he was going through and spreading what God asked him, did he? Because he stopped and maybe he he spoke to the people, as we say, preached to the people, and it just took 3 days because he had to stop, and
Right.
and the time he was taking to announce what God wanted to announce to him just took time,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what caused the 3 days, going across it. So we're
Yeah.
not, the scholars, they got their different opinions on it, but I, I myself personally, I'm just I don't need to know exactly, but if then that's something you can go and break down, and look at it a little bit more and see
I,
why did it take 3 days going across
yeah,
there.
I think it was both. It was a big place and it was a lot of people. That's what
Yeah,
I think.
and then
That's
plus,
why.
on keep in mind is,
Mm-hmm.
was he riding a horse and foot or what have you? Now, if we had a
You don't
car
know.
like we had today, we could probably blow it over in a few hours.
Right,
As
right,
opposed to them,
right,
it takes a
right.
while. A horse doesn't run as fast as a car.
Okay, so it was important for the Ninevites to change their ways because if they didn't, they were gonna be had consequences. They were gonna be overthrown or removed from the power that they supposedly had. So when the Ninevites believed that God was speaking to them through Jonah, they put their pride aside and put on sackcloth.
Yeah, and the sackcloth. It's in other words, look at this from today. We may have our tuxedos or our suits and what have you, or dress such a way that we have a Gucci purse or something like that. They put away all that prideful stuff and everything, and in other words, sackcloth. They went down to the basement, which you find at a Goodwill store. In other words, they humiliate, what they call it,
Humbled
humbled
themselves.
themselves. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Humbled themselves. In other words, they got down to close to earth and say, look, uh, all I find, and this is from the poor all the way to the wealthy in the city, in other words, the upper class and the lower class people. And they all got on one according, which, we should take a note out of this here because maybe would help this human race on the planet. And we get rid of all these social classes for a moment and just come together as human beings and humble ourselves and listen to each other and stop. My education is better. I went to a more prestigious school. I got a better car than you. I got a bigger house than you. That whole mentality, that's what sackcloth. They pushed all that aside, and
I remember
everybody got on the same level. Go ahead.
that was we were talking about this earlier about the sackcloth was like what they did, like their culture thing,
Yes.
and the sackcloth represented like I'm very sorry for this kind of behavior, and
Yeah.
I feel bad. I want to change my ways. I want to be more humble for God.
Yeah. So, and it's more or less they got it. If you want to reach it this way, they got out of their Ferraris and went down to a used car. It's what they did. They
Okay.
humbled themselves,
Okay.
or their clothes, or whatever. They,
Uh-huh.
in other words, they got the wealth and stuff out of the picture and became a human beings.
Okay. So I don't know if they nowadays, but back then, or maybe nowadays, or maybe I don't know what they did back then, but they said that when I looked up, sackcloth was like some type of fabric that was very coarse and uncomfortable, and it was made from goat's hair, and it was
Mhm.
often worn with ashes.
Yeah, and like kind of reminds me of kids. I want some Nike. I want this here. And we went to, was it Payless? And
Yes.
I said, hey, Daddy took his marker and went Payless. I mean Nike on the
Pro
side of it,
wings, pro wings.
striked it out.
Yeah.
Said, now you got some Nikes on.
Yeah.
So, people put too much into this high price stuff. And then what's so funny when they can do these knockoff things, they look just like Gucci bags, but they probably got it for $20 as opposed to 2,000.
Yeah, but from my
And
understanding, they make them all in the same factory.
yeah, they look the
They
same.
just snap a
So
label on it.
and it shows you
Different
that,
labels on.
you know, as they say, then who's the fool? I mean, the one that's paying 2,000. You ask me why?
Mhm.
You said I paid 2,000, and when you got somebody having the same thing, they're getting the same benefits because it's that name brand. It's a branding thing, a marketing thing.
Okay, so in the next chapter, in the 4th chapter of Jonah, God did not bring them to destruction, but Jonah got kind of angry.
You got an attitude.
He got an attitude about it. He wanted them to die. These people, they don't deserve God's grace, you know. So they were in their evil ways, and
Now I'm
even though they may have changed, I still don't
Now I
take
want
that.
I want a home on that.
Mm-hmm.
Now Jonah has crossed the line because how in the world? Who gives him the right to judge any other human being? Only person in the scriptures that can vote. I mean, judge anybody is who? God. So,
Yeah.
and matter of fact, he got so bad. I'm just say this here. He got so bad, and he was even criticizing what God was doing. So he didn't lost his mind.
Yeah, he said they don't deserve God's grace. Yeah. They did this, they did that. They were evil, you know. So anyway, so when Jonah left Nineveh, he probably left to calm down himself.
Whatever they provided the shade for Jonah,
Mm-hmm.
it grew up overnight. So that's
that's
the key thing there. That was it that fairy tale Jack and the Beanstalk threw the beans out. The next day there was a tree there. It went to the giant's land. Okay, but this thing was big enough to put shade on him.
Right.
And then the next day the worm came there and ate and destroyed the tree.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then let's see, what was the other thing? Then the heat that was on him and the wind, and he was so miserable out there, he wanted to die. So he was in bad shape.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to die.
Yeah.
But while he was
miserable.
Yeah, while he was in Nineveh, that's why he's so judgmental. He was just, what in the world, you know, why are you paying attention to them? Mm-hmm. Again, this is God's creation.
Right.
And he loves all of his creation. Nineveh's,
everybody.
Everybody, all the human race. If they have eyes, nose, and face, and have that, then it's his creation.
Right.
Okay, so but Jonah was just being a biased, racist.
You know what I'm thinking?
Yeah, I know. We can't say
that. We can't say that when he was. We can't say what we thought he was being, you know.
Okay, he did not have the right to judge
nobody. You want to give them the initials?
No.
Okay. Anyway, we'll get to the part 2 of this discussion about the definitions of some of the words that we picked out of the lesson. The first word is proclaim. Proclaim means to declare publicly and to be insistent about it proudly. Okay, and the next word is concern.
Yeah.
Means to have a concern about something or someone.
Yeah, God had concern for the Ninevites.
Right.
And he also had concern for Jonah.
Right.
So it was a teaching time for him. And look how he nurtured and loved Jonah. Mm-hmm. And God was ministering to him, because that's what a prophet is, because God is talking to that prophet. And that prophet was supposed to share that message with the Ninevites. Right. So he's concerned about the Ninevites, and he's also Jonah. Okay,
the next word is expectation, which is in the title of our lesson, Christian expectation of grace. Expectation is you look forward to something, that something is going to become real or certain.
Mm-hmm. You know, and that's what God, our Father, loves us, especially we're under grace. That's under the law. Mm-hmm. It's gotten so liberal and comfortable, letting us trying to figure out things for ourselves. And the Creator wants us to know who He is. He wants us to acknowledge Him. And no matter who we are, what we look like, or where we come from, we can all acknowledge who the Creator or who God is. And the way we acknowledge Him, we show respect for one another. Right. We show kindness and love. Mm-hmm. And don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about like a sheep going in blindly. He wants us to find the strength and everything to encourage everyone, but also pay attention. We need to be safe.
Just like we're shown grace, God shows us grace and mercy and compassion. We should do the same for others.
Very good. I think that's good. I'm hoping people got something,
Right.
from this.
I hope you guys
Yeah.
got something. We provoked thought. That brings our discussion to a close. And with that being
Okay.
said, we will.
And just say this here. I mean, that last line that you said there. Put the gospel, put the God's rules and things, and see. In other words, plant those good seeds and encourage the seed, and just be patient enough and watch and see what it does.